Hey everyone, we picked the movie Conspiracy from 2001 and analyzed our chosen moral issue highlighted in the film, the dehumanization of the Jewish people in the context of various moral theories. Dennis, Rachel, Ian, myself, Alex, and Chantel all contributed to this project. So for our agenda, we're going to start with an introduction, move into a historical and ethical background, a presentation of the ethical issue in the movie, and then an analysis using ethical theories, our conclusions, and we're going to show our references as well. Conspiracy is a dramatic portrayal of the 1942 Wannsee Conference, where 15 Nazi officials, led by Reinhard Heydrich and Adolf Eichmann, planned the final solution. The film portrays how the Nazis used bureaucratic language and pseudoscientific justifications to rationalize the systematic genocide of the Jewish people. It reveals the chilling efficiency and detachment with which these atrocities were bureaucratized. The central moral issue we chose to focus on for our review is the dehumanization of individuals, reducing lives to logistical challenges. By exposing these methods, the film highlights the dangers of using bureaucracy to mask inhumane actions. Its relevance today lies in fostering vigilance against similar justifications for violence and emphasizing ethical responsibility in decision-making processes.
Um, the historical and ethical background, as Alex introduced, the Wannsee Conference was held on January 20th, 1942 in Wannsee, Berlin. The meeting was held with 15 Nazi Party and German officials to arrange the final solution of the Jewish question, or the final solution, which was a code name for the systematic annihilation of European Jews. The meeting was assembled by Reinhard Heydrich, and although um, Hitler had already organized German, Austrian, and Czech Jews to be transported to German-occupied Poland and German-occupied Soviet Union to be killed. The goal of the meeting was to discuss the implementation of this already decided plan and ensure the cooperation of leaders in various government departments. The eradication would include the annihilation of 11 million Jews and and provided a critical part in coordinating Nazis' genocidal actions. Within the movie, this was an accurate portrayal based on historical accounts and information that we know, and the bureaucratic focus has many different moral and ethical questions. Among these different moral and ethical questions depicted in the movie, we have decided to focus in on the rationalization of genocide, which included the language to detach from moral responsibility, and the dehumanization, which included justifying the actions of the Nazis and making the Jews like less than human.
Moving on to the ethical issues within the movie, it was very clear upon watching it that the very high-ranking public officials within that meeting um, kind of turned the talk about genocide and mass execution of Jews into a bureaucratic meeting amongst like typical like politicians, like a business meeting, where they rarely use direct language such as murder and killing, and rather replace those words and, in a sense, kind of hit it with terms such as evacuation, resettlement, special treatment, and final solution to describe the mass execution of Jews, where this detachment discussed within the genocide became a bureaucratic process amongst the officials rather than a moral atrocity. And moving on to that, we can see euphemisms contributed to the normalization of genocide amongst these officials, turning more so into a, in a sense, business meeting amongst politicians and congressmen, as opposed to the talk of human lives and within the topic of genocide. And this created an environment where mass murder is discussed alongside mundane topics like food or legal formalities, such as moving individuals and human beings in trains as if they were units of a project, such as clothing, cattle, and anything else along that, where we can see juxtapositions the participants to the ethical gravity of their actions. And moving into the bureaucratic detached tone of the meeting, a few examples consisted of we can achieve a throughput of 1,000 per day per train. With 10 trains, that's 10,000 evacuees daily. Well, within this quote, we can see the term throughput was used to reduce the human beings to mere units in a process. Where this just goes back to a prime example could be a business meeting amongst politicians and congressmen, just talking about normal objects within the meeting rather than actual human beings. And then another quote that was used is, "Gentlemen, I believe we have accomplished something important here today," where we can see within this quote that this self-congratulatory tone highlights their bureaucratic mindset and complete moral void, where it just stems back to the example of a business meeting amongst congressmen and politicians, where for that meeting we got the officials using that tone as if they had created this new law or right for people that they thought would improve their lives. And this detached just creates that more of a disconnect from the more talk of genocide and the mass murder of Jews.
Yeah, and so we chose to highlight a couple key characters. The first one being Reinhard Heydrich. Reinhard Heydrich was the leading advocate for the final solution. He neutralized any objectives from participants in the meeting, primarily through intimidation and rhetorical finesse. Heydrich had complete control of the meeting and manipulated reasoning through exerting his authority and that of the Nazi Party. Heydrich displayed complete abandonment of universal moral duties, as referenced by deontology, and the justification of the atrocities through perceived collective benefits, which is referenced by utilitarianism.
Another character that we chose to examine was Adolf Eichmann, who specifically organized the logistics of the Holocaust. He emphasized train schedules, costs, and capacity constraints, in addition to reducing human lives to logistical figures. In emphasizing these topics, the dehumanization of the Jews was reduced them down to units instead of people. He treats the Zyklon B as a cost-effective solution, focusing on resources rather than human lives, and takes a logistical bureaucratic perspective that, in his speaking, portrays the actions in a clinical way, in turn dehumanizations both the perpetrators and the victims. He also reduces morality to procedural efficiency, failing to recognize the intrinsic worth of human life.
And then the final person would be Wilhelm Stuckert, where in this case he represented the legal advisor and architect of anti-Semitic laws, where for him he used manipulation of legal frameworks to rationalize immoral actions. And then he complicitly through intellectualization, prioritizing legality over humanity. Finishing off with he showcased inaccuracy of human law when divorced from universal moral duties.
Okay, so moving on, we're gonna analyze this moral issue by using the three main ethical theories that we discovered throughout the course. We're gonna start with the utilitarianism. So the utilitarianism overall holds that actions are evaluated based on their consequences, and the main principle is that to maximize overall happiness and to minimize overall suffering. So in the context of conspiracy, this exact principle seems to be manipulated by excluding Jews from this equation, whereas the greater good is exclusively in Nazi ideology and ignores other people. Hence, the genocide becomes morally defensible within this exempt framework. To furthermore showcase this using the movie, we picked some key scenes. First one being the opening remarks by Heydrich, where Heydrich describes the conference goal and highlights the importance of trying to find a final solution to the so-called Jewish question. So we can really see that his rhetoric justifies the genocide as the most effective way to actually achieve social harmony and economic stability within Europe. Furthermore, he seems to portray that the elimination of these millions of lives is a necessary action that needs to be done to achieve the greater good for the Nazis. And so this furthermore implies that he depicts the Jews not as individuals, but more as a dehumanized collective burden, where you can disregard their suffering completely. So overall, he narrows the scope of the greater good, which is held by utilitarianism, to only benefit Germans and Nazis, thus making the whole logic unethical. The second key scene we want to talk about is the scene where Adolf Eichmann explains his logistics regarding the Jewish transportation. So within that scene, he explains the transport logistics of the Jews to the concentration camps, and he does that in a very clinical and dry approach, which really highlights his twisted utilitarian rationale. And he seems to transform mass murder into an administrative task, and also completely erasing the victim's human identity. Um, Furthermore, he seems to follow an approach to minimize resource use, for example, trains and fuel or bullets, and to maximize extermination. So overall, he creates a picture where humans are more portrayed as obstacles. And this also implies a kind of corrupted utilitarianism where efficiency is over morality. Furthermore, we're moving on to deontology, where deontology holds that actions are morally right or wrong based on universal moral duties. Furthermore, consequences are not considered. So, in the context of conspiracy, that means that there's a kind of rationalization of genocide, which is contradictory to this principle. And furthermore, there seems to be an abandoned duty of respect to the inherent dignity of all individuals. And I think, regardless of all, murder is categorically immoral, regardless of justification or outcome. So, also in this case.
Yeah, we then had a look at two key scenes and analyzed them upon the theory of deontology. So the first scene we chose involves a discussion about the sterilization versus the extermination of Jews. And in this scene, the participants consider sterilization as a less extreme measure, but Heydrich supports extermination. So this moment clearly shows a complete disregard for the victims as moral agents. And it's not only a denial of their human status, but also a violation of Kantian ethics, which value respect for human autonomy and dignity. So Heydrich reduces the individuals to tools for achieving their ideological goals, and violates the Kantian imperative to treat individuals as ends in themselves and not means. The second scene we chose features Dr. Stuckart, who argues for the genocide to be framed within the existing legal structures. So this focus on following the law, even while planning those horrific acts, shows a really concerning commitment to rules and bureaucracy. They ignore the deeper moral wrongs of their actions, and it illustrates a major failure in deontological ethics, namely the inability to recognize the higher moral law that categorically rejects murder all the time. Moving on to virtue ethics, this framework focuses on character and the virtues that enable individuals to live and flourish as human beings, rather than focusing only on rules or consequences of actions like the other two theories. According to virtue ethics, actions are virtuous if they align with traits that promote human flourishing. So in the context of our movie Conspiracy, it's clear that how the officials involved abandoned essential human virtues such as compassion, integrity, and justice. Instead, they adopt traits that align with cruelty and focus on efficiency to an immoral regime. We also chose two scenes here that clearly show this issue in the context of virtue ethics. So our first scene shows the group's decision to use euphemistic language like special treatment, for example, to describe the extermination process. They are doing this throughout the whole movie, and with this choice, the participants intentionally hide the true horror of their actions, both for internal and external communication. And here it's clear that they are missing virtues like honesty and compassion. They mask the truth and avoid confronting the moral weight of their actions. And the use of euphemistic language enables them to follow a decision-making process lacking empathy and humanity at all. Another scene that shows that we analyzed in the context of virtue ethics is Kritzinger's moment of hesitation, where he questions the moral implications of their decisions. So he has initial doubts, but despite his initial doubts, he ultimately conforms to the group's consensus and prioritizes self-preservation over the virtues of courage and integrity. So his compromise on integrity, even though he recognizes the wrongness of their actions, is a clear indication to the lack of moral virtues such as justice and humanity within the whole group. And through all these scenes, we were able to see that the movie shows how the rationalization of genocide through dehumanization represents an ethical failure across utilitarianism, deontology, and virtue ethics. It's very interesting because even though each theory analyzes the issue from different angles, ultimately, of course, all theories come to the conclusion that the behavior of the Nazi officials is absolutely immoral.
So, in conclusion, Conspiracy is based on the Wannsee Convention that took place in Wannsee, Berlin, with 15 Nazi officials planning the execution of the Holocaust. Our teams chose specifically to go into the main moral and ethical issues of dehumanization and rationalization of genocide, shown in the movie through euphemisms, linguistic detachment, and other bureaucratic language. We also went into a discussion about the main three characters, Heydrich, Eichmann, and Stucker, who are morally detached from the actions they are committing, leading them to justify the happenings in using euphemisms, linguistic detachment, and bureaucratic language.
So to wrap up our conclusion, ethical theories universally agree that the Holocaust, as planned at the Wannsee Conference, is fundamentally immoral. Utilitarianism fails to justify these actions as prioritizing efficiency over morality violates its true principles of the greater good. Deontology condemns genocide as it breaches universal moral duties, categorically rejecting murder regardless of justification. Virtue ethics opposes the actions due to their violation of virtues like honesty, compassion, courage, and integrity, all essential for human flourishing. The group concurs with these perspectives, asserting that no moral or ethical justification can validate the atrocities of the Holocaust. And here's our references, and thank you for listening.